helpless. Galazeth's going to swing in there for 3 points of damage. There's a counter spell to keep up.
That's just game over, right? Yeah, 3, 4, 5, push you to 6. Yep, and then just kill you.
Dunk, dunk, dunk. Pigeon power, here we go. Birdies are going to just swing in there for the win. Nothing Sperling can do about that. Trading pleasantries.
Yeah, it's an emoji off. And what's got to be frustrating here for Levy is that he's in his hand for an extremely long time.
And welcome back to coverage here of the Strixhaven Championship. Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Cheon. Paul, it's getting serious now, buddy. We're down in the lower bracket round 1, and that means that we're into the elimination matches. No wiggle room left for our players. They fell down to the lower bracket from their initial matches, which these two lost, which means that another loss would eliminate them from the tournament. Take a look at Seth Manfield. He sits ready to battle with his Jeskai control deck. His opponent, Matt Sperling, with Jeskai turns. And only one of these players is going to be able to advance through the lowers here. One of them's going home after this match, Paul. Matchup-wise, we see that Matt Sperling has the break-it deck of the format. What you see, the Velomachus, Lower Hold, the Time Warp, that kind of stuff. But on the bottom, same colors, different approach here from Seth.
Yeah, and you know, Seth is gonna have a tough go of it here. He's already lost to this deck twice in the Swiss portions of the tournament, and I mean, I think perhaps Seth was expecting a slightly different metagame with this current deck selection because, you know, this Jeskai control deck, very, very good against creature strategies, right? You get to play cards like Lightning Helix, Prismari Command, and Wrath of God. However, it seems like, you know, it really, really struggles against decks like Jeskai Turns where you have a lot of dead cards game 1.
Pretty tough to spot somebody a game if you can't steal one here in Seth's seat, and we're going to see how it goes. Of course, both of these players are quite accomplished at the highest levels. Seth, one of the most accomplished Magic players we have, just full stop. But Matt Sperling, no slouch whatsoever. This is his 4th top finish. He even has a finals and a Mythic Championship under his belt. And he's not going to make life easy on Seth. No doubt about that.
Yeah. Seth does have an extremely powerful card in his main deck, which will effectively just shut off any combo attempts that Matt Sperling will try to go for in Dovin's Veto. He's playing 3 copies of this powerful instant in the main, and there's nothing Matt can do to kind of respond to that with his counter magic, as of course Dovin's Veto just says, nope, you cannot do anything.
That's right. Of course, Matt with no way to interact with Seth Manfield's hand, so if a Dovin's Veto go on the stack, well, it's just going to do its thing, at least here in game number 1. Here's a Prismari command now, and it looks like he's going to fight fire with fire. He says, you know what, I would like to destroy your treasure, and I'll take a couple of cards and filter through a little bit here. Prismari command seems pretty important here for Seth in game number 1, as he could use it to get rid of cards that won't have a big effect otherwise.
Yeah. A great way to just filter through all of these dead cards, the Helixes, the Wrath of Gods. In addition, I mean, it is also another meaningful way to interact with Indomitable Creativity, right? Your opponent goes for creativity, you do have a way to break apart that combo by just killing the treasure token.
Okay, he's going to get rid of a couple lands past the turn.
Yeah, and it looks like we're not going to see a whole lot here. It looks like just both players, with the way their hands are currently configured, you're just going to kind of see them run out their lands here. You know, Seth at some point will need to try to find a good window to resolve a Teferi Hero of Dominaria, but of course just going for it and slamming it in turn 5 is a highly risky proposition because that can get memory lapsed. Then Matt Sperling can just make a treasure and then just combo off.
Right. That's one thing that this matchup is going to be punctuated by is Matt Sperling's ability to threaten going for some type of a combo that Seth has to respect.
Yeah, and I don't think Matt is interested in discarding any of those lands because, again, it's extremely important to just keep hitting them. So, the memory lapses are, of course, also really, really strong. I think you know, Velomachus and Prismari Command are also reasonable options here. He does already get the one treasure that's important in going off with the Indomitable Creativity.
Yep. He gets rid of one of the spot removal spells that they run. Fire Prophecy, not going to have a big effect here, so he gets rid of that, continues to hit his land drops, and he's just going to play the patient game for now. Not a lot going on for him. He's got memory lapses to keep things like Teferi, Hero of Dominaria off the battlefield, but apparently just working his way up to a Velomachus.
Yeah. One thing to note, if the games kind of play out in this fashion where Matt doesn't have the combo for a while, is Seth Manfield is playing 4 copies of Shark Typhoon in the main as a way to kind of force the action, right? The moment he finds those Shark Typhoons and starts cycling them, that kind of puts it on Matt Sperling to, try to kind of brute force the combo through. So that's exactly what Seth Manfield is looking for. And it's a far more important card in the matchup than something like a Teferi, because it's just so hard to actually find a window to put Teferi into play.
Matt Sperling's going to use one of his memory lapses to put Expressive Iteration back on top of the library here for Seth. That can be a very high upside play, especially if your opponent is actually looking for a land with Iteration, which often is the case. It wasn't here, however. Seth had a couple of lands in hand, in fact. And
there's a Mizzix's Mastery in Matt Sperling, and he has Memory Lapse backup. Curious what he goes for. And there is a Magma Opus in the graveyard. Seth doesn't have a counterspell here.
No, it's just going to happen.
And even if he did, Matt does have the Memory Lapse for the counterspell backup. So this is just going to resolve.
Wow, what a thrilling conclusion here for Sperling to this turn. He gets to just resolve a Magma Opus and even keep his Memory Lapse in hand. You see Seth tap those lands in response just to float some mana, but as it stands, beautiful stuff there for Sperling. He's going to pass the turn back, and now he's the one with the threat on the battlefield. He's got the 4/4, and he even drew another Magma Opus and an Expressive Iteration for his troubles.
Yeah, and now Seth needs to kind of find a way at some point to deal with this 4/4. It doesn't have to be immediate. He does have Wrath of God and Teferi as answers. He could potentially still try to develop his hand and go for an Expressive Iteration here if he does believe that maybe Matt Sperling does have something like a Memory Lapse this turn.
Some slight upside for Seth in that vein as well is that if Sperling wants to use a Memory Lapse here, he's going to have to burn a treasure to do so.
Yeah, and I don't think Matt is too interested in letting this Teferi resolve.
Right. The problem is he'll lose the 4/4, and then how is he pressuring Teferi?
Exactly. Losing the treasure is kind of rough. If Matt Sperling had an untapped land in his hand, he might have let it resolve, right? Because you're expecting Teferi to go minus. Then he can just cast Velomachus and attack the Teferi. But given that he has a Ragran Triome in hand, this is the safer line to take.
Now this is where he gets to feel bad because he drew the Steam Vents, but it is what it is. You make your decisions based on the information you have at the time, and it would have been extraordinarily risky there for Sperling to go for it. So he's going to settle for an Expressive Iteration. He's even going to get a token, jam for 4 here, and now he gets to pass the turn with the option to cycle Ragran Triumph or just cast a Memory Lapse.
Yeah. This is going to be rough if Seth chooses to go for a Wrath of God there. But, for example, if he does go for Wrath of God here, that clears the way for a Velomachus to resolve next turn. So he might just go ahead and take the 5 damage here and maybe wait next turn to have Wrath of God plus potentially Memory Lapse backup for a Velomachus.
Yeah, it's just, again, the threat that Matt Sperling has of getting a Velomachus onto the battlefield and the fact that it wins the game a large percentage of the time is a lot, right? Seth is having to maneuver through these, and he's going for it. Here comes Wrath of God. And Sperling has a lot of luxury here. He could even Memory Lapse it if he wants and then still play Velomachus. It's not quite lethal, though, is it? It would only be
this is really
10.
interesting. What Matt Sperling is thinking about here is if I go for the lapse, and if I play Velomachus, now Prismari Command is also a card that can allow you to win the game. Now, if you miss with the Velomachus, that is really unfortunate, right? Because if you miss, then all of a sudden that Wrath of God, Seth Manfield's going to play next turn.
Kind of annoying. Mizzix's Mastery. Yeah, Mizzix's Mastery off the top here. That would also be live out for Sperling to hit off of Velomachus. as he has a Prismari command in his graveyard, I believe.
Right, but I mean, Sperling's got to be a huge
favorite here. And there's a Mizzix's Mastery, and there's a
command.
Prismari command anyway. So let's do this the easy way. A nice setup there for Matt Sperling. It looked like Seth Manfield just felt too much pressure from the two creatures that were already on the board and felt compelled to fire off that Wrath of God. He did so at his peril. Sperling finds the win and picks up game number 1.
Yeah. And after sideboard, I'm not sure that it gets significantly easier here for Seth Manfield, right? Because now Matt Sperling is going to kind of have a game plan that's very similar to what Seth is looking to do here. You do have access to the 4 copies of Shark Typhoon. You also still have to respect the combo, right? Although the combo is slightly different this time around. It's Indomitable Creativity into Nezahal. Nezahal, an extrememly difficult threat for this Jeskai control deck to deal with, as it does get to dodge Fry. And Seth's still choosing to keep some number of Fry in the main. And this is not because of Velomachus, but I believe it is more just to have an instant speed answer to giant Shark Typhoon tokens.
Okay. Yeah, you got to do it. He does need to have answers, and anything uncounterable, if it's answering an important card, is going to be a high value card.
Yeah, and the matchup's just going to, at this point, we're looking at basically a close to a mirror, and that's kind of the beauty of this Jeskai Turns deck, just the fact that it has such a strong kind of transformational sideboard plan against control decks that are looking to find ways to really interact and disrupt your combo. You can just go, you know what? I can just play draw go. I'm just going to board in a bunch of counter spells, have a bunch of Shark Typhoons, and kind of get you that way. And Sperling sideboard plan, he's also bringing in Blink of an Eye and Into the Royal.
Yeah, so I think that's wrong, Paul, because I see Commence the End Game up there.
And you're right.
He's running Nezahal, so we'll just ignore that for now.
Yeah, that is the sideboard of I believe John Girard, though.
Yeah,
he's got those cards in his sideboard.
Right, he had the Blink also, and Matt doesn't. So, all right, well, let's get underway here in game number 2. Gideon of the Trials off the top here for Seth. But in the meantime, he's going to have to be content to play a land and say, go, yeah.
It's you can't mystical dispute that, right? And
right.
You just run it out turn 3, just beat down,
Yeah.
You could maybe just kind of steal a game that way. I'm super curious here to see if Seth just chooses to jam a turn 3 Gideon.
Do it. There it is. Gideon of the Trials goes on the stack here. And take a look at Sperling's hand. He just gives a little nod like, yeah, hey, props. You did it. Prevent all the damage from that mountain going forward. We're going to see one copy of Magma Opus go into the graveyard here. That's going to create a treasure token. Seth has to kind of hold his breath here because if there was mastery for it, it gets ugly. But there wasn't. It's expressive iteration here for Sperling.
Yeah,
that would have been a blowout, though, wouldn't it?
There is a lower chance because I believe that I believe that you would be boarding out some copies of Mizzix's Mastery in this matchup.
Okay.
Right, the games go kind of long. You're not kind of locked into the Time Walk plan, and in addition, Seth Manfield does have Rest in Peace as a card in his deck, so you don't want too many Mizzix's Masteries when if Seth happens to draw that Rest in Peace that he has in his deck.
Okay, well, not an explosive turn there for Sperling. It was just expressive iteration. Now, he did get a Fry into his hand and a land on the battlefield, but he passes a turn back, and Seth gets to keep getting to the Trials running, and he gets to have his mana available.
Yeah. Matt does have the ability to Fry the Gideon at some point if he wants to. That would be a clean way to get rid of it. I believe it's only going up to 5 loyalty. Probably going to wait and not use the treasure to kill it. And I would imagine that Seth is interested in just both of those lands, because he currently has none in hand, and he does have 2 disruptive spells already in hand in the Ether Gust and the Mystical Dispute.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to take the Hollowed Fountain and the Sulphur Falls. So He'll get to play that Sulfur Falls. Is he going to get on this magic carpet and ride? Here we go, baby.
You don't play Gideon turn 3 to not be down with it, you know?
It's true. It is providing a legitimate clock here on Sperling. And, you know, you mentioned this in game 1 with regards to Shark Typhoon, but this is similar, right? It's a way to pressure Sperling to say, look, you have to do something. You have to react to me.
Yeah. Now, again, Sperling does have the answer, right? He can kill it with Fry.
Does that work? I always forget which Gideons you can...
I know many of the Gideons prevent damage in some way.
Right. It's indestructible.
Yeah. No. You can target it when it's not a creature, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can fry planeswalkers, so you can just fry the Gideon of the Trials.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it works. Well, that's good for Matt. It's a mana efficient answer, and it means that he gets a just straight up 1-for-1 with a threat on the other side. You know, that doesn't happen that often. Many of the times it's a shark token that they've already drawn a card off of.
Yeah, and I think okay, yeah, and it looks like he is responding to the activation here to get this Gideon off the battlefield. Extremely problematic here.
That's right.
But Seth has a really nice hand here still, right? He's developing his mana, and you know he can cycle Shark Typhoon. But the very important thing here from Matt Sperling is he did get the immediate threat off the battlefield, and he also has a pair of Shark Typhoons to fight Seth's army as well. Ooh, and this is nice. Ether Gust actually interacts with Fry in the way that you would want it to if you're casting it, because it doesn't counter the spell. It simply puts the spell on top of the library. Very important that this interaction is really important because Memory Lapse you would think would do a similar thing, but it does not. Memory Lapse counters the spell, then puts the spell on top of the library. So you would not be able to Memory Lapse a Fry, but you can Ether Gust it.
So what is the plan here, though, for Manfield? Because he gets in for 4, but then Sperling gets to just draw the Fry and can kill Gideon again, right?
Yeah, I think Seth is just trying to really put as much pressure on Matt Sperling as possible here.
Okay, so he wants to blank his draw step, force him to use the 2 mana again, and then try to follow up with a Shark token?
Yeah, it looks like it. I'm not sure if he's going to want to make a 1/1, though. Only because generally you want to make your Sharks at least 3/3 to play around Prismari command.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like now would be a good time for that, but I'm just saying he doesn't have another damage source, right? So like, yeah, Gideon got you down to 10, but you've got a lot of work to do if Sperling can just simply draw Fry and kill your Gideon anyway. Yeah.
I think Seth is probably just thinking long term here. It's like, hey, look, this allows me to get 4 points of damage in. And, the lower he can manage to get Matt, the more opportunity there is for Seth to maybe try to sneak in an attack with a lethal shark, right? There's just different ways he can kind of position the game if you can get Sperling to, let's say, 6 or 5.
Once again, Seth is going to pick a fight here with Sperling by activating Gideon and sort of, saying, Sperling, look, if you want to kill it, this is the time. And Sperling said, okay, fine. Yep, I'll fry it. You got it. So that did net Seth the 4 damage. Now he's going to go for Expressive Iteration.
Yeah, and I imagine we're going to get Commence and exile a land and play the land. I can't imagine Seth is going to go for...
He could just cast Narset, but
never mind.
It'd tap him down to... He could have blue up.
He could, but then that would leave you vulnerable to an Indomitable Creativity, right?
Totally, and that's exactly what Sperling has. Are we going to see the big dino on the battlefield here?
We could. I mean,
There's a whiff. It is funny because Narset does help mitigate the downside of
this is so rough for Seth because now we're going to see a dead Narset, right?
That was brutal.
Matt's going to kill Narset and have a Nezahal on the battlefield.
Yeah, the Narset was helping a little bit with the Nezahal situation. Still a big problem. but you know, at least mitigating some of that card draw. But now, ugh.
Yeah, I mean, this dispute's not going to counter creativity. How is Seth going to get out of this? I mean, you can play a commence the endgame here and make a 7/7. So what's interesting is he's not going to go for it, but it might have been worth a consideration to just play a commence the endgame before.
What do we have here, baby boy? Check this out, Shark Typhoon, hardcast style. Is this going to draw a memory lapse here from Sperling? He'd have to get rid of a treasure, but
jeez,
you don't want to see that Shark Typhoon on the library.
And I like this. Sperling is giving himself outs to draw another mystical dispute if Seth disputes back here.
Which he's going to do.
Right.
This is really smart by Matt Sperling. Remember, when this mystical dispute goes on the stack, he will draw a card from Nezahal, and if he gets lucky and has another dispute on top, he can actually win this fight. It was Prismari Command, though, and that means the Shark Typhoon is resolving. It's on the battlefield, and we've got kind of a race here.
Right, but I mean, look at Matt Sperling's hand, right?
It's insane.
There's just so many options here. I mean, Matt could play his own Shark Typhoon if he really wanted to.
Well, the real question I have is, let's say that Seth is able to cast a spell every turn with the Shark Typhoon out. You know, does Matt actually have a hard time getting through with the Nezahal to actually get the job done? Or will he just overwhelm him because of the card advantage at some point?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. The thing is, if you cast the commence the endgame, right? That's a 6/6 Shark plus a 5/5, right?
Right.
So that's the thing with the Nezahal. You can just it's a lot worse if you just can't attack with the Nezahal anymore, right?
Right. And it looks like Sperling is going to take the aggressive line here. He's going for Magma Opus right now, and he's going to try to burn Seth out of this game, Paul. And he actually found the tools to do it. He has another Magma Opus and double Prismari Command in hand.
Yeah, I think this is going to be way too much for Seth to actually fight through, right?
Right.
Not only does he have to deal with the creatures in play, this is a lethal attack. Even if Seth goes commence the endgame and gives himself 2 tokens, right? Oh no, it's not. That's a 2/2 Shark. Excuse me. That'll put him down to 1, and then he's gonna have to fight through double Prismari Command. No.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like Sperling's taking the correct line here, looking at the board and saying there's probably not a great chance for me to fight through all the Sharks if Seth does a bunch of stuff. And so I'm just going to go over the top here and try to burn you out. And he has found the tools to do so.
Yeah. And
really nicely played by Sperling here.
This will very likely be game. Sperling really wanted an untapped land so that he can go double command into memory lapse. But actually, he can just go Prismari Command 2 to your face and make a treasure, which would then give him enough mana to be able to have memory lapse for a potential mystical dispute from Seth Manfield.
And that's exactly what he's going to do. Target player creates treasure token. That's him. Does 2 damage to any target. That's you. And we're going to see a fight here. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of Sharks on the battlefield, but a lot of cards drawn. And Sperling looks like he's got this one, Paul.
Yeah, but the Sharks aren't going to matter. The attack is actually irrelevant here, as 2 Prismari commands should be resolving.
That's right.
Yeah, you got the lapse. This resolves. You get a treasure. Next Prismari command, and Seth Manfield is done.
He's done. And in fact, this is going to be the end of his tournament. He's going to have to settle for another top finish on the resume. Matt Sperling navigated that match beautifully and picks up the victory to keep his dream alive of making it not only back to the finals, but actually picking up that trophy.